Hi, I'm Philip Muggleston from the HANA Academy. In the next set of videos, we're going to look at how you can access the predictive analytics capabilities of HANA when you're using the HANA Express edition. In this video, we're going to finish our look at predictive analytics when you're working with the HANA Express edition by looking at the AFM, or the Application Function Modeler. This is something that we'll see in Eclipse, and it allows us to generate the SQL script code that we saw in the previous video where we had to kind of write it ourselves. So it's a very nice interactive way for a developer to build the SQL script necessary to run an application that uses predictive algorithms. So if we go back to Eclipse, remember we're logged on as the developer user that we created in the Getting Started video for Predictive. We are connected to our tenant database, SHA, that we created, the one we activated the script server for. So everything should be up and running. And again, we imported a schema, some demo data of PAL, and we're going to be actually using, again, the stocks table, which is available in that schema. Now, we also created, when we did the dev user, we set up all sorts of authorizations and rights so that we would be able to use the AFM. So what we should just simply need to do to get going is go to the top right to our list of perspectives. And what we want to do is open up the development perspective, so the HANA development perspective. Once we're in there, we maybe just want to minimize some of these windows to get more space. You'll see that we have project, repositories, and systems. Now we can go straight into repository, and we can see that for the database connections we've got the different options. And again, we're going to need to work as the developer user. Don't use the system user to whichever tenant or system DB they're connected to. Make sure you're using your developer user connected to your tenant database. So what we want to do first is to actually work with a repository. So in this case, what we can do is we can say create a repository workspace, so we can work with this repository locally. So we'll make sure we've selected that system connection with your developer user, give your workspace a name, we can call it workspace 1 or whatever you want, hit finish, and now we should see that we have a workspace created called workspace 1. And what we can do then is actually basically start to get going. We can right mouse button and we can hit new, and we create a new repository package. And the name of that repository package we can call, for example, AFM, because we're going to work with the application function modeler. Okay, everything else you should be able just to leave as it is. So we've created a new repository package, and then within that you can actually now go to the new option and choose other. And here what you want to do is to go down to the SAP HANA section, look for database development, and then flow graph model. In fact, the application function modeler is available. It's something that's also known as the flow graph model editor. Hit next. Let's give it a name. In fact, this time we're going to do auto arima, just like we did in the previous video, but we're going to have the code generated for us. I'm going to make sure it's activation as a stored procedure and hit finish. And now you'll see that it opens up the flow graph editor. This is the application function modeler effectively. And we can see at the bottom right, we've got the predictive analysis library. We've got a list of the different algorithms. So for time series, we should find that auto arima is in that list. What we need to do is simply say, okay, we're going to use that algorithm. We're going to drag and drop that into our white space here, basically our palette where we can work. We then are going to be prompted, okay, we'll need some input data, we'll need some parameters, and we're going to have the model going out as a result. We already saw the SQL script code for this, so you should have an idea for it already. So what we can do there, if we've got some data, we can just go to the general section. Now we know we have pal.stocks as a table that already exists, so we can actually choose something called a data source, drag it and drop it on the left or anywhere you want here on that white area. Put in, for example, stocks, and it will go searching. It finds in the PAL schema we have a stocks table. So it will now add that. And then we can drag and drop the little arrow from stocks into the data section. And notice we get a green, so it's validated that the input data structure is correct. So it fits the right columns in the right kind of order. Then we've got the parameters. Now for that one, we can just have a quick look, go to the fixed content section, and you'll see there are a number of parameters in there. If you want to learn more about these, you need to go to the PAL reference guide, but you get a good set of initial default parameters normally when you're working with the AFM, the Application Function Modeler. Of course, HANA, help.sap.com/HANA platform, and then go down to find the PAL reference guide is available there. So we're looking good for the parameters. What we also need to do is define our results table. Now this table doesn't exist yet, so what we can do is use a data sync with a template table. So in this case, what it will do, it would allow us to basically create that table at runtime automatically, as long as we make that connection. However, we're not quite out of the woods yet. There's a couple of changes we need to make. Now for that results structure, the signature of the table, actually we need to change the value because the default is 50 characters long for the value in our model, but actually it could be longer than that. So I'm going to change that to 5,000 as our varchar value. What I also need to do is specify for this output table, where is it going to be stored? What's the name of the table? So for that, I mouse over and I get the overall settings and I click on the properties, and I can see I've got an authoring schema. I'll put it in the developer user schema because we authorize the technical user to do that, the system repository user that will actually do the work. We can give it a name, so we can call it, for example, model. And if we want to run it multiple times, we can hit truncate table to ensure that each time the results table gets cleaned out before the algorithm runs. Now we can see we've got a green tick, so we're looking good. However, there's one bit that you're very likely to forget, I often do. You also need to specify the schema where the procedures are going to be stored that get generated in a moment. So for that, go into the white space, right mouse button, hit properties, and then put in the target schema. Again, I'm going to use the developer user. Of course, you could use any schema that the user and also the repository technical user has write access to. So we're now good to go. We can go to the toolbar at the top and here activate the object. It'll save and activate it for us. And if all goes well, we'll get a little message saying that the activation was successful. So that looks good. We can go back to our flow graph entry. We can now go to the right and choose execute, and it will generate us a little bit of SQL. So call dev user, it was that schema it created in, then the AFM auto arima function, and you see that it's called it. So it's generated us some code, but we just want simple line to call here. Obviously, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. So if you were to navigate from the Systems tab to Dev User, have a look at your tables, for example, you'll see that tables have been created. Actually, the parameters data, the auto arima parameters table has been created, and model was our results table here. And if you preview it, we'll see that that model has been populated. And again, we set value to 5,000 because we can have some quite long values in there. What we can also do is go to the procedures, and there we'll find here are the procedures that were created. There are actually two of them. One, the just general auto arima in the AFM repository area, and then we've also got auto-arima, which is one that's slightly more detailed. Now, if you want, you can always have a look at those to see a bit more of this kind of syntax that was created, but basically you should be up and running and ready to go. So we've done the first step, which is actually to build our model. The next thing is actually to do some predictions, some forecasting into the future. So for that one, we would need to use another algorithm, and we can do that all simply with this single flow graph or AFM entry. Of course, if you want, you could create a new separate one. But I'm going to go back to the predictive analysis library. I'm going to then look for the ARIMA forecasting, which is this one, drag and drop that in. So I'm going to have an ARIMA forecast. Now this time, what I want to do is I want to use the results table as an input. So I want to send that actually to be my input. And it's gone green because it's now got some validated input. Of course, you've got the parameters section. So we'll change the properties for that because we want to actually forecast, let's say, go up to ID 200 in terms of our input data. So that's now set up correctly. And we've got our results. And again, for that one, like we did previously, we can use the data sync template table to have it generate as a table. We can actually just drag and drop the value. And as before, it's still red because we need to go to the properties here and ensure that we've specified the schema so dev user, and a name, so we can call it results or forecast. Now we find we've got the green button. Now you don't actually have to keep this model table if you want in your process. You can actually have it build the model and just send it straight to the forecasting, so that model table never gets physically stored. If you delete this item here, that's what would happen. But I think we'll keep it. So we're looking good. So let's go ahead now and save and activate this one. So the job has run, and now we're ready to run it. So again, we go to the right hand side, we can hit, and it's going to call that same AFM auto ARIMA stored procedure. Of course, that's now been recreated. You can see that it's run and it's finished. And if we go to our list of tables and we refresh that, we'll find we should have a results table now in there. And if we are to preview that data, so we can see here are our predictions. We've got actually our values with the low and high confidence limits. So what we've seen in this video is how we can use the flow graph entry, basically the application function modeler or AFM, to generate the stored procedures and generate the tables and basically build all the code we need when we want to work with the predictive analysis library in HANA. It also works, in fact, when you're working, for example, with the business function library, the BFL of HANA, or also it works if you're, for example, working with an R server, which HANA also supports. Just to finish off, if we go to the HANA Academy, you will find that there is a video series on predictive analytics near the end. And if you go into there, scroll right, you'll find there's one on the application function modeler. So if you want to learn more and a bit more time and a bit more detail, then go in here and you'll find some good examples of calling different algorithms, whether it's PAL or R, using the application function modeler capability, which is available when you're using Eclipse. So that's finished our tour of the predictive analytics. When we're working with the Express Edition, we've seen how to do the initial setup, we've used SQL script to run predictive capabilities, and we've also used the AFM or the application function modeler to access the predictive capabilities without having to write any code ourselves.